My name is Margaret Elaine Cook. I'm 82 years old, born and raised in a sleepy suburb just outside Albany, New York. I was a nurse for 45 years, a wife for 53, and a mother for 3 children, though these days only one of them ever pretends to care. I lost my husband, Harold, 5 years ago. Cancer. Took him slow and cruel. And ever since then, my world's been shrinking like the seams of an old dress. But I never thought it would disappear completely, until the day my own daughter Madison looked me straight in the eye and said, "You have nothing left to offer but labor." She said it with her arms folded, standing in the hallway of the house I paid for, the house I raised her in, the house she now claimed was hers. That morning I had just come in from trimming the hedges. My knees were sore, my hands blistered from raking leaves, and the casserole I had cooked for her family was still warm on the stove. And yet, all she saw when she looked at me was free help, an unpaid maid, a burden with a heartbeat. I dropped the gardening gloves, blinked back the sting in my eyes, and asked her to repeat herself, thinking maybe I'd misheard. But no, she meant every syllable. You cook, clean, and babysit. That's all you're good for now. You don't earn. You don't contribute. You just take up space. I can't keep letting you live here for free, Mom. That word, free, felt like a slap. I didn't answer her. I simply turned around, walked slowly up the stairs, packed a single overnight bag and left. Not a word, not a sound. Just the quiet shuffle of an old woman walking away from everything she ever built. But what Madison didn't know was that I had never transferred the deed. The house still belonged to me. And as I walked away into the rain, I wasn't leaving in shame. I was disappearing to take back everything I gave. And by the time she found out, it was too late. Because the next morning, when Madison came back from her yoga retreat with her smug little girlfriends, the locks were changed. And a new family stood at the front door, smiling, holding their keys, and reading a welcome letter signed by me. She dropped her phone, screamed, banged the door. But I was gone. And the house was mine again. Now let me tell you how we got there. It didn't start with betrayal. No. It started with love like it always does. It began with a sacrifice no mother should ever have to make. But I did anyway. Because that's what mothers do, right? Even when it breaks us. Even when it kills the last bit of us we have left. But there were signs. Oh, there were signs. Ones I ignored for years. Signs like, "Wait, did you just hear that knock?" Because the truth is, someone else knew my secret before Madison did. And they weren't happy about it. If this story made your heart ache or your blood boil, drop a comment saying "continue" and tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because the next chapter gets even darker. I remember the first time I held Madison. She was red-faced and wailing, her tiny fists balled up tight like she was already bracing for the world. I was only 29 then, still in nursing school, and juggling shifts at the hospital with diaper changes at home. Harold worked double hours at the mill just so we could save enough to buy our first home. The same home my daughter would one day claim as hers. But back then none of that mattered. All I saw in Madison was promise. She was the kind of baby you held like porcelain, not because she was fragile but because she already carried weight, purpose, fire. I raised her with everything I had and then some. Every scrape on her knee I kissed. Every spelling bee I clapped until my hands stung. Every heartbreak I held her while she cried and whispered, "You are enough." So how did that little girl turn into a woman who looked me in the eye and said I was only worth my labor? It wasn't sudden. It was slow, like rust creeping up iron. After Harold died, I couldn't stay in that big house alone. Too many echoes. Too much quiet. Madison offered I come live with her and her family. She framed it like a gift, said it would give me purpose again. Said the kids needed their Granny Meg. So I sold the car, boxed up my life, and moved into her guest suite. First it was fine. Her husband, Eric, was polite. Her boys were rowdy but loving. I helped with school pickups, lunches, doctor appointments. Madison said I was indispensable. But slowly her tone shifted. You're spoiling them with those old-fashioned cookies. Don't rearrange the pantry. I like it my way. Maybe skip the birthday party this year, Mom. It's too much. And one day, I overheard her on the phone, talking to someone about setting boundaries with aging parents. She said I was a lot. Said I hovered. Said she couldn't keep carrying the emotional load. I cried myself to sleep that night. I hadn't cried in years. But things really snapped the week of her birthday. I had spent all day baking her favorite lemon bars, despite my aching back. I ironed her dress for her dinner party, arranged the flowers, even polished the silverware. And when I handed her the dessert platter, she looked down at it and said, "You don't have to try so hard, Mom. Honestly, the only thing you have left to offer is labor." I stood there, holding that tray like it was the only thing tethering me to the floor. And she walked away. Just walked away. Later that night, her friend Michelle said to me in a hushed tone, "You're lucky Madison even lets you live here rent-free. Most of us would never." She laughed like it was a joke. But nothing about that moment felt funny. That night, I went online and pulled up the deed records. Just to be sure. My name was still there. Margaret Elaine Cook. Sole owner. I never transferred it. I'd meant to years ago after Harold passed, but something always stopped me. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was God. Maybe deep down, I knew the day would come when I'd need something. Anything to stand on again. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the kitchen in silence, staring at the glowing screen, reading and rereading the deed. By morning I had a plan. I called a real estate attorney, asked some quiet questions, found out I had full legal control. No one could contest a thing. That same week, I reached out to a property management agency. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to reclaim. Quietly. Dignified. So I did something bold. I waited until Madison and her family left for a weekend retreat. Then I changed the locks. Then I packed everything of mine. Every trinket. Every memory. Every folded sweater. I left behind only what wasn't mine. And believe me, that wasn't much. By Sunday night, a lovely young family had moved in, renting the home directly from me. A single mother, 2 little boys. Sweetest kids you've ever met. She cried when she saw the living room. Said it reminded her of her own mother's home. And me. I took a bus to a quiet little inn a few towns away. No goodbyes. No letters. Just silence. But I didn't vanish completely. Because I knew Madison wouldn't stay quiet for long. And I was right. The very next morning I got a call from my old neighbor, Patty. "Meg, sweetie, she's losing her mind. She's banging on the door like a lunatic, yelling at the new tenants. Police were called. She says you've been kidnapped or gone senile." I sipped my tea. "Let her think that," I said. Because the truth, I was just getting started. But then, that night, something unexpected happened. I found an envelope slipped under my in-room door. No return address. Just one word scrawled on the front. Traitor. If you felt the sting of betrayal in this chapter, or if you've ever been made to feel invisible by the ones you love, don't keep it inside. Share your thoughts in the comments and let's lift each other up. Like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter, where Margaret discovers that her quiet plan has ruffled more than just feathers. It's awakened a storm. I stared at that envelope for a full minute before I picked it up. My hands trembled as I peeled it open, half expecting a threat, half fearing a confession. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No name. No signature. Just 5 words written in sharp black ink. "You'll regret this. Watch out." I folded the paper back up, calmly slid it into my purse and exhaled. I had known there would be backlash. I expected anger, confusion, even betrayal from Madison. But this was spite. Personal. Someone wanted me scared. But I wasn't. Not this time. That same morning, I went downstairs for breakfast at the inn. The waitress, a gentle woman named Lila, poured my coffee with a soft smile and said, "You have that look in your eyes. Like a woman who's just taken back her story." I nodded, smiling faintly. "I suppose I have." What Lila didn't know was that for the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night. No early morning screams of grandchildren. No barking commands from Madison. No sideways glances or whispered gossip at her dinner parties. Just peace. But peace doesn't last long when you've left behind a fire. And Madison was smoke and gasoline wrapped in entitlement. That afternoon I got a call from her number. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another call, from a blocked line. Then came the voicemails. Mom, what have you done? The police said the house lease is legit. You really kicked us out. You're punishing your grandchildren now. Over what? Being honest. I deleted it. Then another. I hope you're proud. We have nowhere to go. Eric's furious. The boys are crying. You're destroying your family. That one stung. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But I pressed delete anyway. Because I had spent decades holding this family together with bleeding hands. And no one noticed I was bleeding. The next day, Madison showed up at the inn. How she found me, I'll never know. Maybe she called Patty. Maybe she guessed. But she stood in the lobby with tears in her eyes and venom in her voice. Mom, I just want to talk. I refused to come down. Lila stood in front of the front desk like a shield. She's not seeing visitors today, she told her. Madison screamed. She's my mother. That house is mine. You don't know what she's done. But Lila didn't budge. Eventually Madison left. But not before shoving another envelope into Lila's hand. Give this to her, she hissed. I opened it later that night. Inside was a photograph. A picture of me at the bus station the day I left. And written across the bottom. You can run, but you can't hide from family. Something chilled me about that photo, not just because it was invasive, but because it meant someone had followed me. Someone had taken the time to track my movements. And suddenly, the envelope under the door made more sense. It wasn't Madison. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't thought about in years. Madison's ex-husband, Jason. He was the one who originally helped Madison get custody of the boys after their divorce. He never liked me, always said I was too involved, always had a snake's grin and a voice that slithered between words. I remembered a night years ago when I overheard him telling Madison, "Your mother acts like she owns you. One day you'll have to choose." At the time I thought nothing of it. Just tension between son-in-law and mother-in-law. But now I was wondering if Jason had his own reasons for getting involved again. Especially since he stood to gain something. You see, Jason was still a co-signer on Madison's new house loan. A home she could no longer afford without mine to anchor her. And if I took my house off the equation, she defaulted. He paid. Unless he found a way to get it back. And me, out of the way. The next morning, my room had been broken into. Nothing stolen. Nothing touched. Except one thing. A photo of Harold and me. Gone from my nightstand. Just the empty frame left behind. And a note in its place. You took the house. We'll take everything else. If this chapter had your heart racing, drop a comment with a single word. Chills. Because this is no longer just about a house. It's about secrets buried in family walls, and old ghosts rising with a vengeance. Like and subscribe because in the next chapter, someone's about to go too far. I held the empty frame in my hands and sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. My fingers trembled, not out of fear, but out of a slow-burning rage I hadn't felt in years. That photo of Harold and me. It wasn't just a picture. It was our beginning. Taken in front of the porch of that same house the week we moved in. Both of us laughing, young and unsure but deeply in love. Now it was gone. Stolen. Not for money. Not for sentiment. But for control. I had been quiet for most of my life. Respectful. Obedient. The kind of woman who said thank you when handed crumbs. Just because I knew how hard the bread had been to earn. But now I wasn't just a grandmother or a widow. I was a woman who had been betrayed by her own blood. And someone, maybe Jason, maybe Madison, maybe both, thought they could shake me enough to give up. But they didn't know me at all. That morning I checked out of the inn. Lila hugged me goodbye and whispered, Don't disappear forever, Meg. You still matter. I nodded but said nothing. I moved into a small apartment I found under a different name. My maiden name, Margaret Lynn Whitaker. It was quiet, modest, tucked above an old hardware store. I paid the year's rent in cash using the income from leasing out my house. I bought a prepaid phone, a new account under a different email. Then I made my first call. To a woman named Savannah Mertz. Savannah was once my student nurse when I taught clinical rotations in the 90s. She went on to become one of the sharpest elder law attorneys in the county. I helped her pass her state board exam. She never forgot that. And now I needed her to return the favor. "Margaret Cook," she said when I called. "I never thought I'd hear from you again. I need legal eyes on a mess," I said plainly. "My daughter thinks I'm gone, but I'm very much alive. And I need to make sure everything stays that way." Within days, Savannah had drawn up legal documents, protective clauses, and a cease and desist order. Jason had no claim. Madison had none either. The house, the lease, the rental income, it was all airtight. She even filed a restraining order on my behalf, just in case anyone decided to get physical. But Savannah also uncovered something I hadn't expected. Madison had attempted to apply for a reverse mortgage in my name 6 months before all this began. She'd forged paperwork, submitted it under an account tied to my Social Security. She hadn't just insulted me. She'd tried to steal from me. Legally. The only reason the mortgage didn't go through was because the bank flagged the birth date as suspicious. "She's over 80. Too risky," the report said. Savannah looked at me gently. "You want to press charges?" I stared out the window for a long moment. Not yet. Because what I wanted wasn't revenge. It was exposure. But before I could act, the threats escalated. One morning I went downstairs to get my mail, and found a dead bouquet stuffed in my mailbox. Roses. But their heads had been ripped off, stems snapped, thorns still glinting. A note taped to the inside of the box read, "You built a garden of lies." I didn't flinch. I went back upstairs, sat at my small kitchen table, took a deep breath. Then I called a private investigator. His name was Glenn, retired NYPD. Sharp eyes, sharper instincts. I told him everything, gave him names, showed him letters, and he got to work. Within a week, Glenn confirmed it. Jason had been tailing me. Madison too. They were working together now. Something about shared custody issues, blended resentment, and financial desperation. The final straw came when Glenn called and said, "You won't believe who just tried to get power of attorney over you." I didn't have to guess. "Madison," I said flatly. He grunted. "Filed last week. Said you're mentally unwell. That you vanished and left family behind." I sat silently. My heart didn't pound this time. Just settled. That's when I knew. She had crossed the line from entitled to dangerous. It was no longer about hurt feelings or pride. It was about erasure. She wanted to erase me. And for the first time in my life I realized I had something more powerful than rage. Truth. So I made a plan. One final play. And it would start with an envelope of my own. But not one filled with threats. One filled with receipts. Before I mailed it, though, I got one last unexpected visit. Late one night, a knock echoed through the apartment hallway. I looked through the peephole. And there, standing in the dark, was Eric, Madison's husband, holding my wedding photo. His eyes were hollow. His voice barely a whisper. "I need to tell you something. Before they do something you can't undo." If your jaw dropped reading this chapter, comment "She's not done yet." Because Margaret's only beginning to uncover the rot in her own bloodline. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next chapter reveals a betrayal even she didn't see coming. Eric looked like a man carrying a mountain on his back. His shoulders hunched, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he held out the photo of Harold and me. The same one stolen from my room. "They made me take it," he said quietly. "Jason said you'd only believe something was wrong if it got personal." I stepped aside without a word and let him in. He sat at my tiny kitchen table, gripping the mug of tea I gave him like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I studied his face. He'd always been passive, a man who went along to keep the peace. But now I saw something else, guilt and fear. "They're planning something, Margaret," he said, not even calling me Mom like he used to. "Jason's obsessed with getting control of the house. Madison's not who she was. She talks about you like you're the villain, like you destroyed her life by leaving. They're feeding off each other." Kept my voice calm. "Then why come to me now?" He looked down. "Because they want me to help fake a mental health report. To say you're delusional, that you're unstable. So a court will hand over power of attorney." I sat back in my chair. My breath caught, but I didn't flinch. "They're willing to lie under oath," he continued. "Jason even said he has a friend who can forge medical documentation. And Madison, she's too deep in it. She thinks if she gets the house back, everything will go back to normal." Took everything in me not to cry. I had carried Madison inside me. Sang to her before she was born. Rocked her through her nightmares. Worked overtime so she could have dance classes. And now, she wanted to bury me alive in paperwork just to stay afloat. "I'm sorry," Eric whispered. "I don't know how it got this far." I stood up and walked to my small writing desk in the corner. I opened a drawer, pulled out the envelope I'd been preparing all week, and handed it to him. "Give this to Jason and Madison," I said softly. "Make sure they read every page." He hesitated. "What is it?" "Truth," I replied. "Bank statements, copies of the deed, audio recordings, legal documentation, everything Savannah and I have gathered. And a copy of the criminal report I'll file if they so much as forge one more document or step onto that property again." Eric looked stunned. "You recorded them?" I nodded once. "I'm old, not stupid." He took the envelope, stood slowly and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back and said, "Thank you for not treating me like them." I waited until I heard his car pull away before I finally let my knees buckle. I sat on the cold tile floor and let the tears come. Not for fear, but for the grief of losing a daughter who was still alive. Over the next few days, things went quiet. No knocks, no messages, no more notes. I felt like I was holding my breath underwater. Then Glenn called. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "What now?" asked, bracing myself. "They took your envelope straight to a lawyer. Tried to use it against you. Claimed you were threatening them with blackmail." I exhaled slowly. "Of course they did. But the lawyer, he knew Savannah. Called her immediately. Said it didn't feel right. She cleared everything up. Now Madison and Jason know you're working with someone powerful." Good, I thought. Let them sweat. But the storm hadn't passed. Because 3 nights later, my apartment was broken into again. This time nothing was left behind. Nothing stolen. Except my notebook. The one where I had handwritten all my personal thoughts. Journal entries. Letters to Harold. Even a few notes to my grandchildren for when they were older. It felt like a violation deeper than any threat. Like they had reached into my soul and yanked it out with dirty hands. The next morning, Savannah showed up unannounced. She placed a thick legal file on my kitchen table and looked me straight in the eye. "It's time to go public," she said. "You've given them chances. Warnings. Warnings they laughed at. We file for an injunction, we go to the media. And we freeze any financial action they try to take under your name." I hesitated. She added gently, "Margaret, you're not just protecting yourself anymore. You're sending a message to every woman who gave everything to her family and got tossed aside like trash." That struck me hard. So I agreed. The documents were filed the next day. My story, sanitized but true, was submitted to a local journalist Savannah trusted. We didn't name names, but it wouldn't take much for the dots to connect. And then, something happened I never expected. I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No envelope this time. Just a folded piece of paper slipped under my door. It read. I didn't know what they were doing. I was scared. I miss you, Grandma. It was signed by Madison's oldest son, 12 years old, and somehow already wise enough to know something wasn't right. I read the note again and again. But just as my heart cracked open, another letter arrived that same evening. From Jason. Short. Bold. You went to war. Fame. So will we. If this chapter stirred something inside you, pain, pride, or power, drop the word fight in the comments. Margaret isn't backing down, and neither should you. Like and subscribe to follow this battle to the end. Because in the next chapter, the gloves are coming off. The word war didn't frighten me. I'd been through worse battles in my life. Battles where the enemy wore a smile and shared my last name. But something about Jason's note, that single sentence scrawled in thick ink, felt like a challenge I wasn't supposed to win. Only, he didn't realize I had already won the hardest war. The one where I had to choose myself over the very family I once gave everything to. I folded his letter neatly, placed it beside my teacup, and looked out the window at the sun sinking behind the roofline across the street. Peace wasn't something that just fell into your lap. Sometimes you had to drag it into your life, clawing and limping the whole way. But peace wasn't what Jason and Madison wanted. They wanted control. They wanted to break me. And I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. That evening, Savannah called. Her voice was tight. We have a problem. Closed my eyes. Go ahead. They've contacted the Department of Adult Protective Services. Jason claimed you're a vulnerable senior with cognitive issues. They're pushing for an emergency evaluation. I felt a cold rush spread down my spine. They're trying to get you declared mentally unfit. If they succeed. Savannah paused, letting it settle. They can file for full control of your financial assets, your house, your life. I sat in silence for a moment before whispering, how fast can we stop this? We can't stop the report. But we can prepare. The next day, Savannah arranged for an independent psychological evaluation with a licensed therapist. I passed with flying colors. The therapist even laughed gently and said, you're more grounded than half the people I see in their 30s. But damage control wasn't the same as protection. Jason and Madison were still one step ahead in their own sick game. And they were growing bolder. Glenn, my private investigator, called with an update. They tried to bribe one of your renters, he said. Offered her 10 grand to say you were harassing her. I felt my fingers curl into fists. She refused, he continued. Said you were the kindest landlady she'd ever met. I let out a slow breath. I want them exposed, Glenn. Not just stopped, exposed. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, you sure you're ready for that kind of heat? I thought of Harold. Of everything we built. Of Madison, the little girl who used to draw hearts on my lunch napkins before school. And I thought of what she had become. Yes, I said. Turn up the fire. So Glenn pulled every record he could find. Jason's bankruptcies, Madison's forged signature attempts, even a flagged child support case Jason had buried years ago. It wasn't just messy, it was criminal. We handed the file over to Savannah, who prepared a lawsuit. Fraud, harassment, defamation. It was bold, public, and it would hit their reputations like a hammer. But just as we were finalizing the filing, something happened that shook me harder than anything else. I got a call from the school. My grandson, the one who sent me the letter, had collapsed in class. Panic attack. They found him curled up in the corner of the art room, crying and saying, "Please don't make me lie about Grandma." I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. But when I got there, I wasn't on the visitor list. Madison had blocked me. I stood in the lobby of the children's ward, my chest hollow, rage boiling beneath my skin. My hands trembled as I held the bouquet I'd picked up on the way. Blue irises, his favorite. The nurse looked at me gently and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." His mother gave strict instructions. I nodded stiffly. "Thank you." I left the flowers behind and walked out into the cold night air. Outside, Glenn waited in the parking lot. Change of plans, I said. No more slow moves. I shook my head. No more mercy. That night, Savannah filed the lawsuit. The media caught wind within 48 hours. Headline: Elderly woman fights back after daughter allegedly tries to steal home assets through forgery and lies. Photos of Madison and Jason began circulating. Their employers got wind. Jason's car dealership suspended him. Madison's PTA group removed her from the board. But the most devastating blow came when the news segment aired my recorded call with her, where she said, clear as a bell, "You have nothing left to offer but labor." The internet did what it always does. It erupted. Thousands of women, mothers, grandmothers, even daughters, flooded the comment sections. This broke my heart. She gave everything and they tried to erase her. My own daughter said something similar. I thought I was alone. I wasn't alone anymore. And neither were the countless others like me. But as the lawsuit moved forward and the story spread, I received a message that sent a new kind of fear through my bones. A voice message. From an unknown number. Jason's voice. Dark. Low. Seething. "You made your point, Margaret. But if you keep this up, you won't just lose your family. You'll lose your life." I didn't flinch. I forwarded the message to Savannah. Then to the police. And then I made one final call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My eldest son. The one I hadn't seen since the funeral. The one who left because of Madison. "Daniel," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I need you to come home." And he replied without hesitation. "I was waiting for you to ask." If your heart raced or your eyes burned reading this chapter, type "I'm with Margaret" in the comments. Because the fight isn't over yet. And in the next chapter, the family fractures deeper than ever before. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe no one should ever be discarded after they've given their whole life. Daniel arrived just before sunrise. I hadn't seen him in over 8 years, not since Harold's funeral. That day had torn our family apart in more ways than one. He and Madison had a screaming match in the driveway about money, responsibility, and who was really there for their father in the end. He left angry and I never blamed him. I just missed him. But now, standing in my doorway, tall and older, with gray at his temples and sorrow in his eyes. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms. And I stepped into them. I hadn't cried since I left Madison's house. But in that moment I wept. Not because I was weak, but because something in me had finally unclenched. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. "I heard everything," Daniel said, holding me. "I saw the news. The voicemail. Mom, I should have never left you with them. You had your own wounds," I said softly. "We were all bleeding." We sat down over breakfast, and I told him everything. From the moment Madison told me I had nothing left to offer, to Jason's threats, to my grandson's panic attack. He listened, jaw tightening, fists clenching. But he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he took a deep breath. "Let's finish this. Together." That week, Daniel became my shadow, driving me to court appointments, vetting lawyer Savannah introduced us to, even visiting the renters in the house to thank them for standing firm. But his most important visit was to the boys. My grandsons. Daniel had remained close to them behind the scenes. Quiet phone calls, discreet gifts, birthday cards signed Uncle D. They adored him. When he saw the eldest, Jacob, the one who wrote me the note, he hugged him so tightly I thought they'd both collapse. "Mom's really scared," Jacob whispered. "She keeps saying you're going to ruin her life." Daniel crouched down, looked him in the eyes and said, "Nobody's ruining anything. We're just telling the truth." That night, Daniel returned with a scribbled note Jacob had slipped him. It read, "They fight all the time. Jason says Grandma needs to go for good. He doesn't mean jail." I heard him. "He means go." I stared at those words until they blurred. I had known Jason was reckless. I hadn't known he was dangerous. We sent the note to Glenn. The next day, Glenn told us Jason had made contact with a man with a criminal record, someone known for solving problems quietly. That's when I knew I had to act, not just to protect myself, but to make sure Jason could never touch my grandsons again. We filed for a restraining order. And for emergency guardianship. Savannah warned me. It'll be messy. They'll come after you harder. He nodded. I'm ready. And they did. The next morning, I woke up to graffiti on the side of my apartment building. Old witch. Die slow. The police took photos, opened a case file. Savannah told me, this is textbook intimidation. You need to stay somewhere else. Daniel moved me into his house across town, a quiet place with a long porch and a garden out back that reminded me of Harold's. The day I arrived, I walked barefoot across the grass, looked up at the sky and whispered, we're almost there. But Madison wasn't done. That evening, she held a press conference. She stood on the steps of a courthouse, tear-streaked and shaking, and told the world her confused mother had turned on her. She played the victim flawlessly, talked about being a struggling daughter and a single mom under attack. Jason stood beside her, silent, hands folded. They thought they were winning public sympathy. But they didn't expect what happened next. Because Savannah had prepared our own press release. And this time we went all in. We released the audio clip of Jason threatening me. The documents of forged signatures. The rental contract, the title deed. And the power of attorney request with my misspelled name. We even included the letter from my grandson. His handwriting, uncoached, raw. And suddenly the tide turned. Comments flooded in. This is elder abuse. I can't believe her own daughter did this. My mother went through something like this. I stand with Margaret. Madison's followers turned on her. Sponsors dropped out. PTA groups cancelled her appearances. But Jason, he vanished. He shut down his business. Disappeared off social media. No one knew where he went. And that scared me more than anything. Because a man with nothing to lose is a man who becomes desperate. Then late one night, Daniel and I returned home to find the porch door ajar. The back window cracked. Inside, our kitchen was destroyed. Drawers pulled out, papers ripped, pictures of Harold shattered on the floor. And a message scratched into the wall with something sharp. Next time it'll be blood. Daniel called the police. I sat on the porch swing, staring at the sky. I wasn't afraid. I was done being afraid. The next morning, Savannah filed a full criminal complaint. Charges for harassment, attempted fraud, conspiracy, and we submitted one final petition. For full legal custody of my 2 grandsons. A few hours later I got a call from Glenn. You're not going to believe where we found Jason. My heart froze. Where? Glenn sighed. He was hiding in the crawlspace of your house. If you believe Margaret is standing not just for herself but for every elder who's been silenced, type protect her in the comments. Because in the next chapter, the confrontation finally happens. And secrets are dragged into the light. Like, share and subscribe, the storm is about to break. Jason was in my house. The one Harold and I built brick by brick. The one where I took my first steps as a wife. And my last steps as a mother who thought love could conquer all. Now it was the hiding place of a man who wanted me erased. He broke in through the basement, Glenn told me. Cut the power to the security cameras. Brought food, blankets, burner phones. He was planning to stay a while. Maybe worse. I felt my throat tighten. Did the tenants see him? They thought they heard something, Glenn said. Scratches in the walls, movement at night. But they chalked it up to old pipes. He waited until they went on vacation to sneak in. Closed my eyes. Is he in custody? Glenn paused. He ran. When we found the crawlspace, he'd already fled. But we found this. He handed me a torn notebook page in a plastic evidence sleeve. Written in Jason's sharp, aggressive scrawl. She thinks this is over. I'll make sure it ends the way it should have from the start. I stood on Daniel's porch, the wind slicing across my arms, and I realized. He wouldn't stop. Jason had nothing left. No job, no money, no allies. Madison had cut him off the minute the media turned. She was busy drowning in her own shame, pretending she'd been misled. But Jason wasn't pretending. He was hunting. The police placed me under temporary protective surveillance. An officer rotated outside Daniel's home each night. We reinforced the windows. I changed my number again. And Savannah fast-tracked the hearing. Meanwhile, my grandsons were placed under temporary court-ordered visitation with me and Daniel. And when Jacob saw me again, he didn't run to hug me. He collapsed into my arms and whispered, "Are we safe now?" I held him tighter than I ever had. "You're safe, baby. I promise." But even as I said the words, I felt the weight of what was still ahead. The custody hearing, the confrontation, and whatever Jason had planned next. 2 nights before the court date, I found a package on the porch. No return address. No markings. Inside was a single item. My wedding ring. The same one that went missing from my jewelry box the day I packed up and left Madison's. There was no note. Just the ring, placed in the center of a black velvet pouch. I clutched it to my chest. My knees buckled. He had been in my bedroom. Before I even left. Before any of this began. Jason had been planning this for longer than we thought. The next morning I walked into court with my back straight and my hands steady. Daniel walked beside me. Savannah in front. Glenn watching from the gallery. Madison sat across from me at the petitioner's table, dressed in gray, her lips trembling. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. Jason was not present. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a sharp gaze and a nameplate that read Judge L. Parker, reviewed the files silently for several long minutes. Then she looked up at Madison. "Miss Cook," she said, "you filed this petition claiming your mother is mentally unfit, emotionally unstable, and incapable of managing her own affairs." Madison nodded stiffly. Judge Parker continued. "Yet the court has reviewed hundreds of pages of evidence, including audio recordings, sworn affidavits, psychiatric evaluations, and an extensive pattern of attempted fraud on your part." Madison's lips parted. She stammered. I was under pressure. Jason told me." The judge raised a hand. "This court doesn't make decisions based on excuses. It makes them based on facts. And the facts show that your mother is of sound mind, legal authority, and emotional clarity. You, however, are in violation of multiple state laws." Madison began to cry. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Judge Parker's voice remained firm. "Ms. Cook, the harm you've done cannot be undone with tears. You not only betrayed your mother, you endangered her. You used your children as leverage. And you enabled a man who remains at large and a credible threat." The courtroom fell silent. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Cook, do you still wish to pursue custody of your grandsons?" "Understood." "Yes, Your Honor. For their safety and their peace." Petition granted. The gavel struck like thunder. And just like that the tide shifted. Madison broke down sobbing. Her lawyer whispered something, but she shook her head violently and whispered, "She'll never forgive me." "I know she won't. I wanted to. I really did. But there are some cracks that run so deep. Forgiveness can only grow in the distance." After the hearing, as we walked out, Savannah's phone buzzed. She froze. "What is it?" Daniel asked. She looked up. "Jason's been found." My breath hitched. "Where?" Glenn answered from behind us. "On the roof of your house." My knees nearly gave. "He was watching the courthouse live stream," Glenn added. "Waiting. As soon as the ruling went public, he climbed up. Left something behind." We drove straight there. By the time we arrived, police had already cordoned off the area. Jason was gone again, but not without leaving his mark. Spray painted across the roof tiles in thick red letters. "She took everything. So I'll burn it all." If your heart is still racing, type "Don't look away" in the comments. The storm hasn't passed yet, and next chapter will test everything Margaret has left. Like, share and subscribe, because justice doesn't come easy and she's not backing down now. The words on my roof didn't scare me anymore. Not because they weren't threatening, because they were. They screamed of desperation, of someone unhinged and unraveling. But fear had no more room inside me. It had been replaced by resolve. Jason's message wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. He'd lost everything, and men like him don't go quietly. They go with gasoline and matches. The fire marshal arrived not long after we did. He inspected the roof, the crawlspace, the old wiring Jason had messed with. His face was pale when he came down the ladder. He was rigging something, he said. Crude but dangerous. One wrong spark, and this whole place would have gone up. Daniel's jaw clenched. Savannah covered her mouth. I stood there, unmoving, staring at the porch where I used to rock babies and drink lemonade with Harold. He tried to burn my memories. He tried to destroy my peace. But he didn't expect me to fight back. The police put out an all-points bulletin. Jason was officially a fugitive now, wanted for attempted arson, multiple counts of harassment, and endangering a minor. My grandson Jacob, who had bravely testified that Jason pressured him to lie. Madison. She went silent. After the court ruling, she moved into a small apartment across town. She sent no apology, no letter, just a transfer of custody paperwork and a single message. Do what you want with them. You already took everything else. The grief of that sentence hit deeper than any courtroom blow. I didn't want to take her sons. I wanted her to be their mother. But sometimes love means stepping in when someone else steps out. Jacob and his little brother Tyler settled into Daniel's house with surprising ease. We cooked together, watched old westerns, took slow walks around the block. They called me Grandma Meg like they used to when they were small. But I could still see the shadows in their eyes. They flinched when the wind slammed the screen door. They froze when the phone rang too long. Trauma leaves fingerprints on the soul. One night, Jacob stood in the doorway of my room, clutching his blanket. Do you think he's going to come back? I set down my book, opened my arms. He crawled in beside me and whispered, I used to hear them talk about you. They said you were weak. That you'd fold. I stroked his hair and said gently, then they never really knew me. The next day, Savannah got a tip. Jason had been spotted sleeping in an abandoned car lot on the edge of town. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. But he'd left something behind. Another message. Scratched into the hood of a rusted van with a screwdriver. She built a legacy. I'll bury her in it. It was clear now. He wasn't just trying to scare me. He was trying to erase me. Savannah sat me down that afternoon. I need to ask you something hard, she said. He nodded. Go on. If we find him, and he tries something, would you be willing to testify in court? Press full charges. I thought of that house. That roof. My grandsons' faces. I thought of the smell of Harold's shirts, still folded in a box in the back room. And I said, yes. That night, Daniel reinforced every lock. Glenn increased patrols. I kept my phone close, but my heart even closer to the truth. You can't break a woman who's already walked through fire. The next evening, I received a call from Glenn's emergency number. I answered immediately. What is it? His voice was strained. He's at the house. My breath caught. He came back. Not just that, Glenn said. He brought a gas can. We have officers en route. You need to stay put. But I was already grabbing my coat. Daniel tried to stop me, but I looked him in the eyes and said, this ends tonight. We drove in silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than words. When we pulled up, the house was surrounded. Police cruisers, flashlights, officers moving like shadows. And there, standing on the lawn, gasoline sloshed at his feet, lighter in hand. Jason. His hair wild, his eyes red. And behind him, a photograph clutched in his fingers. Me, Harold, and baby Madison. I stepped forward, the officers yelling behind me to stay back. But I raised my voice. Jason. He turned slowly. The lighter sparked in his hand. You took everything, he shouted. You poisoned her against me. You turned the world on me. I didn't blink. No, you did that. With every lie, every threat. You destroyed yourself. He took a shaky step toward the porch. Toward the stairs Harold built with his bare hands. You think you won, he hissed. But I'll take what matters. I shook my head. You never understood, Jason. It was never the house. It was never the deed. It was love. That's what you tried to destroy. And that's the one thing you'll never touch. He raised the lighter. But before he could drop it, bang! A foam canister knocked it from his hand. Police tackled him to the ground. Gas spilled harmlessly across the dirt. Jason screamed as they cuffed him, but the only words I heard were mine. You're done. They dragged him away into the night. No. I stood in front of that house, barefoot on the grass, with the wind in my hair and tears on my cheeks. Not from fear, but from victory. Not the kind that celebrates, the kind that survives. If you've walked through your own fire and came out stronger, comment, still standing. Because in the next chapter we find closure, healing, and the final lesson Margaret leaves behind. Like, share and subscribe. The ending will stay with you long after the story ends. The morning after Jason's arrest, I returned to the house alone. The police tape had already been removed. The locks had been changed again. The porch was quiet, the flower beds trampled but still holding on. As I stood in the doorway, keys in hand, I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot finally coming undone after years of silent strain. This house had seen everything. The joy of my children's first steps. The grief of Harold's last breath. The betrayal I never thought I'd live to see. And now it had survived fire, not of flames but of fury. And it was still standing. Just like me. I walked through each room slowly. The living room still smelled faintly of lavender and lemon oil. The kitchen tiles were cracked in the same place they'd always been. The bedroom, mine and Harold's, was just as I left it. I opened the window and let the light in. It poured across the old quilt, dancing across the floor like it had done 1,000 times before. There, sitting on the nightstand, was the ring. The one Jason had returned. The one he'd taken from me before all this began. I picked it up, slid it onto my finger and whispered, "We made it, Harold." The funeral for the man who tried to ruin my life would not happen in my house. Not symbolically. Not emotionally. Jason had been arrested, denied bail, and charged with multiple counts. Attempted arson, harassment, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Savannah had ensured the charges would stick. Madison never showed up in court again. Instead, she sent a single envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. Inside was a letter. "Mom, I don't know what I became. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a resource. Maybe it was after Dad died. Maybe it was when Jason moved in. I don't know. But I know I was wrong. I know I can't fix it. Sorry." Madison. There was no return address. No phone number. Just a letter from a woman who once was my baby girl. And while I didn't respond, I felt a small warmth creep back into my chest. Not forgiveness, but space for it. Daniel and I stood on the porch 1 week later. The boys playing in the grass, their laughter bouncing off the wooden beams Harold had built. "She'll reach out again," Daniel said. He nodded. "Maybe. And maybe I'll be ready. But not today," he added. "No," I said. "Not today." Life began again in small, beautiful ways. Jacob started drawing again. Pictures of houses, warm with light in every window. Tyler made me a paper crown and called me Queen Granny every night at dinner. Daniel planted new roses in the backyard. The red ones. The same kind Harold had given me every anniversary. And I started writing again. Not just journals but letters. To other women. To the elderly neighbor who feared her son would steal her savings. To the widow who couldn't speak up when her daughter-in-law called her a burden. To the nurse who told me her own mother was sleeping in a shed behind her cousin's house. Each letter began the same. "You are not invisible. You are not weak. You are not done." The local newspaper ran a follow-up story titled, Grandmother reclaims her home, her family, and herself. They asked for a quote. I gave them this. It wasn't just about the house. It was about remembering I still had value, still had a voice, and that no one, gets to tell me when my life is over. Months passed. The house became more than just mine. It became a refuge. Quiet place for healing, for growth, for second chances. One Sunday morning, as the boys ran through the kitchen chasing each other with pancakes in hand, Daniel leaned over and asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I looked around, at the framed photos now back on the wall, at the laughter, the sunlight, the calm, and said, "Not for a second. Because sometimes you have to lose everything, your comfort, your illusions, your family as you knew it, to finally come home to yourself." This wasn't just my story. It was the story of every woman who was told she'd outlived her usefulness. Of every mother who gave until she bled, then was told she'd given too little. Of every grandmother who refused to fade away quietly. I didn't vanish. I reclaimed. I didn't disappear. I decided. And I didn't lose. I lived. If Margaret's story moved you, taught you something, or reminded you of your own strength, please comment, "I still matter." Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Because this isn't just entertainment, it's truth. And truth deserves to be heard.